Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast. Please subscribe to our channel.
All I gotta say is, who that? Hey, what's going on, Who Dat Nation? My name is Timothy J. Jones, and yes, I am the host of the State of the Saints podcast. Thank you so much for checking out the State of the Saints podcast, where we talk New Orleans Saints. Shouts out to everybody that's here right now as you start to file in. This is indeed live. We are as live can be. A special shout out to the chat. Special shout out to those that are listening or watching this at home, on the go, wherever you are, wherever you may be. I really do appreciate it. On this edition, we're going to be talking a little bit about Saints' new head coach, Kellen Moore. Met with the media at the NFL owners meeting. There were some changes that took place, some new changes that will be implemented this season when it comes to some of the rules around the National Football League. One in particular I thought was very intriguing. We'll get into that. And also I have a few sound bites that I want to play to break down some of the key points that I took away from I'll say about 40-minute interview with Kellen Moore. But I want to give a special shout out to everybody that checked out the interview that I conducted with Rod Walker of the New Orleans Advocate. He covers the New Orleans Saints as well as the New Orleans Pelicans. Special shout out to him, man. He's always willing to give me a few minutes of his time, man, and I was very appreciative of that, man. And if you didn't check it out, make sure that you do, as well as the other interviews that we have done over the last couple of weeks. A special shout out to all of the guests that we've had. It's such a privilege to be able to talk and discuss football with such great minds of the game, so I want to give them their appreciation with that. Tomorrow, of course, is Saints Talk with Timothy J. Jones on Bleacher. And then at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'll be back here on the State of the Saints podcast. We'll be interviewing Ryan from Saints Block Party. If you follow Saints Block Party on social media, on YouTube, those guys do a really good job, Ryan and Adam. So I'll be chopping it up with Ryan, talking New Orleans Saints football for a while. So if you're not doing anything around 9 p.m. Eastern, stop on by the State of the Saints podcast, and we'll be talking football with Ryan. But let's go ahead and get into it. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the Saints and head coach Kellen Moore. He spoke with the media at the NFL owners meeting. There was some very interesting points that he made. There was a couple topics that I'm pretty sure you wanted to hear him discuss. One of those topics was Saints quarterback Derek Carr. We'll go ahead and get into that one right away. Everybody's been wondering where Derek Carr's mind is. A lot of criticism for the quarterback not showing up to Super Bowl activities when you're seeing so many different leaders on the New Orleans Saints team that were a part of that. We've seen Cam Jordan, we've seen Demario Davis, we've seen Tyrann Mathieu. I mean, the list goes on and on of players that showed up to the event in New Orleans. And Saints fans thought that it probably would be a good look if Derek Carr was to show up. But nobody really has heard from Derek Carr since the season has ended. And we know that Derek Carr, wasn't necessarily wanting to, be fully committed to this whole change. We know that there were reports about him maybe wanting to trade or maybe thinking about the Saints releasing him where he can go out here and choose his suitors. But, the question on everybody's mind is how committed is Derek Carr to this new regime? And Kellen Moore spoke a little bit about Derek Carr. This is what he said.
Yeah, no. Derek is obviously a really good quarterback in this league. We've again, I think, been pretty consistent as we've gone through this process. With the restructure, as far as just giving ourselves some flexibility from a roster standpoint. Derek, I'm excited to have him back with us really shortly. Obviously, April 14th will start, and I think that's the fun part. These guys go through the offseason. They have a chance to spend time with their family, invest in all that, which is the right thing to do. And once you get back April 14th, you kind of begin the process of football's in the fold, and it'll be a great process.
Do you get the sense that he's bought in, though, excited about what?
Yeah, we're excited to team up.
So Kellen Moore feels like this is a really good partnership here. But I did find something very interesting that he said. I want to make sure that I actually have this. I hope that I do. I'm going to go ahead and look at make sure I have it. But it was something very interesting that he said about free agency. This may be it. Let me make sure.
Yeah, I feel like you've done a nice job of adding real value to our team, and obviously it's the beginning process of the whole offseason where you're continuing to try and acquire guys throughout this whole process, and so I feel like we're heading in the right direction. Certainly when you go through free agency, players have a choice, and I think that's an important aspect of free agency is they have a choice as well, and so we feel really excited that a number of guys really had a high desire to come back to New Orleans and be part of the team, be a part of the community. And so it was really cool to get to know those guys in a short period of time as they've gone through their process.
Well, that wasn't necessarily the soundbite, but I mean, it's pretty clear that he was talking about free agency and guys wanting to be here. But there was a portion of the interview. I thought maybe I had the clip, but I don't. But I'm going to paraphrase this here. He talked a little bit about the free agency process and signing guys and having guys on the roster. And, if things start to come up, you make those adjustments based on if something is intriguing. I'm paraphrasing that, but I just thought him bringing that up was interesting because I think it kind of coincides with the issue with Derek Carr. I think that, the fact that Saints fans haven't heard from him, I think that's very telling. I think that's very telling that, Derek Carr hasn't been around, and maybe he isn't necessarily, satisfied with, with the team, or feels like, he has a role, or maybe they told him that he had one, and maybe, he feels like maybe there's something else that is out there. So I think that Kellen Moore is saying in so many words that this roster isn't set in stone, and I encourage you to check it out. I wish I had that clip. I thought I did, but the fact that he's not willing to say that this roster is set in stone, I think that just tells us that if there was an offer, or maybe, if both parties agree, because we know that Derek Carr has a no trade clause, so he has to agree to be traded to a team. And, some reports have that, or I don't even want to call them reports, people make compelling arguments about possibly Derek Carr being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, or a team that is needing a quarterback. And, I think that if the Saints were to make a deal with, say, the Steelers, I think that Derek Carr would be open to that. I mean, they have a really good team. They have a really good head coach. And, I think that they have pieces around him that can help him to be able to generate success for the Steelers. I'm just using them for an example. So I just think that by Kellen Moore saying that, I think that pretty much just lets us know that the Saints are at this time committed to Derek Carr being the starting quarterback, but it's not like they just in love with him. And I also took away from that interview by listening to Kellen Moore. Even though they re-signed some of these players, he wants players of his own. He wants guys that symbolize him, that represent him, especially when it comes to the quarterback room. He talks about adding quarterbacks to the team. This is this clip.
I think every team in the NFL is always trying to bring in quarterbacks and develop them under any circumstances. So everyone does homework every year on quarterbacks. It's a very valuable position, and so obviously we feel like we have Derek, who's played a ton of football and we feel great about, and then we have certainly our organization has invested in quarterbacks the last few years with Spencer, Jake, and then Ben, and so we got a number of guys that we're excited to develop as well. Yeah, I think anytime you can add value to the room, I think is important because it is a developmental position. The age of the quarterbacks peaking is usually a little later. Those guys take a little bit longer. They have longer careers than other positions, and so these guys sometimes take a little bit of time. You got to have patience and ability to spend time with those guys and develop them in a consistent system.
So notice he said that the organization has brought in. And I want people to hold on to that. And the reason why is he's letting everybody know that the organization selected these guys, not him. And I think it's well within his rights. I think that it's only fair that if the New Orleans Saints, go through this draft process, they need to allow him, if he wants a quarterback, to be able to draft him. And the question was on a lot of people's mind is how involved would Kellen Moore be with this draft process? How involved would he be when it comes to, working lock and step with the scouting department? This is what he said.
Certainly there's a language thing that you're always just trying to connect each other, connect how everyone sees it, how everyone sees, the evaluation process, how you see the players fit in your certain scheme, because obviously there's some transitions there. And so all conversations have been great. Yeah, just if you're talking from a player's perspective, I think, it's us just having continuous conversations. I was fortunate. I've spent a lot of time the last week and a half with Jeff just kind of going through the pro day circuit, so to speak. And so we get to have a lot of conversations through that process. And, quickly, Jeff was at Dallas at one point. I was at Dallas. Obviously, we didn't overlap. But, just being in the same area at one point, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of discussions that we've had independently that kind of bring us together pretty quickly.
So I like the fact that he is working alongside Jeff Ireland and the scout team, because by coming into a new environment, being a new head coach for the very first time, you want players that represent you, right? That represent who you are as a coach, and also to make your job even more successful. Like, they're going to have guys that are layovers from maybe an old regime, and they probably are good players, and they will work with you when it comes to your scheme, when it comes to the things that you do. They probably will be able to get on board. But I think that you want Kellen Moore to find the guys that make him feel comfortable, that can put his stamp on this football team. The guy that can be his statement guy. So to me, I think that the New Orleans Saints need to allow him to do that. There were several stops along the whole pro day process for these draft picks. These guys that are going to be drafted pretty high. The Saints went to Miami. They checked out Cam Ward. They checked out Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. These quarterbacks out here. So if Kellen Moore wants a quarterback, I think that the New Orleans Saints should allow him to get that quarterback, or any player that that makes him feel comfortable, that will come into his system and be able to generate that success that he feels that player can do. Moving from a 4-3 to a 3-4. So if that player that Kellen Moore or Brandon Staley, the defensive coordinator, wants, they feel like will make that immediate impact, I think that the New Orleans Saints need to allow him to do so. I don't think that they need to focus so much on, okay, we got to bring this guy in a certain prototype. And I also like in a part of that interview when he talked a little bit about some of the status quo. Like we know that the New Orleans Saints throughout the years, they have a type, right? Especially when it came to the defensive line, big, tall guys, 6'6", 6'7", long wingspan, right? They kind of, played a certain type of way. They kind of, very uniformal, if you will, score off the charts when it comes to, the athleticism and, when it comes to that, right? Everybody, they love their RAS guys, right? We know that, so, but the fact that he understands, I'm talking Kellen Moore, that he wants players on his team that fit what he wants, but he doesn't want to pass up on a guy that can come in and give this team instant success. And that's one of the main reasons why the topic of this episode is where should the Saints focus? Because you think about this team and the state of the Saints right now, no pun intended. You think about this team. This is a team that's at a crossroads. Now, if you talk to anybody on airline, they'll probably tell you that they're close. I wouldn't expect them to tell us anything different, even though the outside kind of knows where this team is. They have a lot that they need to build on in order for them to have continual success. Yeah, you'll probably win some games because you don't have the worst players on the face of God's green earth, so you're going to win some games. But I think the biggest issue that Saints fans have is, can this team maintain continual success? And I think if you're talking about continual success, you need to look at the best players that can be those cornerstone players for you in the future. What the New Orleans Saints did in 2017, they found those players. Rather, they were looking to find, players that can fit a need and they turn into cornerstone players or not. But what the Saints need is those players that are going to come in, that are going to give you that immediate impact. And when we're having these conversations around 4 and 5 years from now, we're talking about who we need to pay because said player has done a really good job and he deserves his 5th-year option. That's what you need to work on. I think the biggest issue is not so much talent. The Saints, top heavy, are talented. Like they're very, very talented. The starting lineup that they have talented guys. The problem is what happens if somebody gets hurt? And that is the issue. So you ask yourself, what should the Saints do? Like, if should the Saints just look at players of need? Like, we know across the board, I mean, the list is endless when it comes to the needs of this football team. Every position, you can make a compelling argument that the Saints need that position more than the other. But my thing is, if you find a generational talent, like Ashton Jeanty, for example, a lot of people consider him as a generational talent. If you already have Alvin Kamara and you know that Alvin in a better scheme with a better coach, better system, he's going to give you maximum, effort. He's going to give you some Christian McCaffrey, Saquon type performances when it comes to running backs, right? Like we know what Alvin can do, right? In a really good environment. Are you looking at that like for 2025? Or are you looking at Ashton Jeanty, who is going to give you success in 2025 and in 2026 and in 2027? And if Alvin Kamara is no longer with the team, he is the future at the running back position. Are you looking at it that way? Or the guy on the screen right now, if you're watching this live, Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, a guy who is going to give you that impact that in the future could end up being that Travis Kelce, that George Kittle, that Gronkowski tight end for your team and being one of the faces of the franchise. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for this. I think if you ask someone on airline, they'll tell you that they want to draft positions of need, what can help them win right now. If you're asking a Saints fan that is on the street, I think that they're looking for something a little bit more. than just, 2025, let's just put some behinds in seats. I think Saints fans want some stability. They want stability when it comes to this team giving max effort year after year. They don't want you just to put a Band-Aid on it and and that's it. Like, okay, they're giving really good effort. They're trying really hard. Yeah, they won a couple games that they shouldn't. That's cool. But are you building on something? So that's the real question. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for that. If you get a player of need, then they eventually can become that cornerstone player. But let's just say, you have stability at a certain position. Do you still draft another guy that can come in to play that position that can end up being a future of that position, and not only the future of that position, but possibly one of the faces of the franchise? That's interesting. But I like the way that Kellen Moore is not just tied down to a certain prototype. And I just think that sometimes you got to go with the best guy, especially if that player has shown you that he can play at a high level. You got to trust the process and yourself that you can find a role for that player, instead of like just trying to find a player and saying, I think I can make him work. I think that you need to go with somebody that like no matter what situation that you put him in, he is going to thrive. Like, that for a fact, not somewhere where you're just trying to figure out a role for him. If you don't look at this player and for a fact that, okay, I'm running a 3-4, I put this guy in my defense, he is going to make, give me immediate impact, then I don't think we need to be having this conversation. I think that the issue is you're finding players that are good, but they're not good for you. You ever went out with somebody and they're a good person, but they're just not a good match for you? Not the fact that they're a terrible person, just not a good match. You'll see that person and probably meet the next person and it's probably great. You'll meet the next person, it's probably great for you, right? So I think that you might want to just kind of step back. Definitely need to allow Kellen Moore to work alongside Jeff Ireland. I think that they need to feed off one another. And I'm pretty sure it's a huge transition for Jeff Ireland too, because Jeff went from, selecting players that he felt could fit a Sean Payton system. Then he did the same thing with Dennis Allen, but Dennis Allen came from a Sean Payton coaching tree, so it wasn't that different. You're dealing with a guy that has a different mindset and doesn't fit that culture that was built over the last nearly 20 years. So it's new, but I think that it's a good thing. And I also appreciate Kellen Moore for making that statement about finding the right guy, but also you don't want to pass up on a guy that can give you that impact and be a future of your franchise. And you don't want to pass up on that guy just because, he doesn't have a long wingspan, or, he have a 40-inch vertical leap. Like, who cares? If he can come in and give you that success that you need and be able to, fly off the screen, jump off the page, then, you want to make a serious decision. And if that decision means that you draft that player, I guarantee you Saints fans will be very, very satisfied with that, no doubt about it. But let me go ahead and read some of your comments. Thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. I just ask that you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you are here right now, if this is your first time, thank you so much. Hopefully by the end of this episode, we would have won you over. But let me go ahead and read some of the donations here. I really do appreciate it. Michael Morgan, thank you very much for the 199. Says, is T-Mac a bad pick at 9? And Alfred says, thank you very much for 199. Alfred says, so if DC not at OTAs, then what? Okay, I'm going to answer both of those questions first. Once again, thank you for the donations. As far as T-Mac, a bad pick at 9, I don't believe that he's a bad pick at 9. All right, first off, that video that's circling around talking about he don't watch film, I mean, that didn't happen last week, right? Look, we need to understand this. I want everybody to understand this. Football is not just a competition on Sundays. I'm going to say that again. Football is not just a competition. on Sunday. And what I mean by that is these teams are trying to get a competitive edge no matter what. When I was at the combine, I was sitting around with the rest of the media folk, and we're just waiting for, the draft picks to come to the podium, whatever draft pick is up. And I mean, talk, it just this circling about this player, about that player. And also, we have to understand that these teams have an agenda. If they can put something out there about a player that they like, that can make a team that they know may want that player or have a need for a player at that position, guess what? They're going to put it out there. And they're going to make that team sweat at the decision of drafting that player. Like, do y'all remember Laramie Tunsil? Y'all remember when Laramie Tunsil was supposed to be a top 5 pick in the draft. And all of a sudden, the picture comes out of him with a gas mask on, bonging, with a bong. Y'all remember that? Hours before the draft, and he slipped down the draft board to Miami. Like, you're telling me, oh man, somebody, like, this just happened? Somebody was holding on to that. So all I'm saying is, when it comes to Tetairoa McMillan, the dude is a talented player. He's good. I think he works hard. Well, I know he works hard. He checks all the boxes when it comes to competitiveness. I've seen him go up against some of the best cornerbacks that college football had to offer, won some of those matchups. Now, we can sit up here and allow a podcast or something that he said to prohibit us from believing that this guy can actually make an impact for the New Orleans Saints if he were drafted. But me personally, I definitely, if I was in the Saints front office and I was in that role, would draft this guy. I think that he's made of the right stuff. I think he's a hard worker. And I think that he can be a guy that can contribute to your team right away. So we talk about him not watching film. And, he didn't say that he didn't watch film. Okay, I know that people like to run with that topic, but he didn't say he didn't watch film. He said he watched films in a collective group, but that doesn't mean like, he doesn't want to watch film at all. So we got to put this thing into context. But I also understand that, once again, football isn't just played on Sunday. Competitive football is not just played on Sunday. That was one of those situations that I feel like they just put out there because the team probably wants Tetairoa McMillan, and hopefully he'll fall to him. And we know that if somebody smells blood, guess what? They're going to chomp at it, especially these sharks. Some of these sharks that are media people, not everybody, but they're always trying to find something to be able to talk about. And sometimes people blow things out of proportion. I think that this is one of those situations. If Tetairoa McMillan is available to the Saints at 9 and the New Orleans Saints feel like he can come in and make an impact, I agree with them. And that comment that's circling around doesn't change my mind about the way that I think about Tetairoa McMillan. I think that any team that passes up on him based on that podcast comment is probably going to have a general manager that's not going to be around very long, plain and simple. And Alfred says, what happens if Derek Carr doesn't go to OTAs? Well, if he doesn't go to OTAs, I think that pretty much tells us everything that we have been speculating, that Derek Carr doesn't want to be with the New Orleans Saints. I think that it's pretty obvious that there's something going on. I don't know, when it comes to his commitment level where that stands, but I think that Derek Carr will be there unless he was told something behind the scenes that we have not heard. Like they are considering, drafting a quarterback, or, he feels like maybe that quarterback is going to come in and try to replace him. If that's the case, then maybe he won't be there. But I think that OTAs will tell us a lot. Derek Carr has been criticized about not showing up to the Super Bowl and not being in the city and not being involved in some of these activities that New Orleans had. I mean, New Orleans was popping off for at least two and a half months between Super Bowl and Mardi Gras. So him not showing up to any of those activities are very, very telling when it comes to maybe something is going on there. But look, if the Saints decide to move on from Derek Carr, I don't think that there will be any love lost between these two parties. I'm talking the fans and Derek Carr. The fans, to me, do not want Derek Carr. Based on what I'm pretty sure that there are some fans out there that probably like Derek Carr. But the pulse of the Who Dat Nation that I've been sensing and feeling is that nobody really wants him to be here. And I just think that the Saints are setting him up for failure if he is around. He's going to get booed out of the Superdome anytime things go wrong. And anything that he does, rather it's minimal, is going to be amplified because people don't want him, because I think that Saints fans have had enough and Derek Carr has had enough. And also the loyalty level is in question. And like I always say, if you're from the city, you already know what I'm talking about. If you're a Saints fan, you already know what I'm talking about. It's hard to win back the fans when you lost them. So I just think that both parties may need to separate. So I understand why the Saints did what they did. It was a smart decision because it helped them when it comes to cap space. But I think the Saints have a really serious decision to make because the morale isn't very high. So you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to do something that excites this fan base, and hopefully they can find that. Even if the Saints start off hot, I don't think that's going to satisfy Saints fans. I think that they're going to be like, man, I've seen this movie before. I just think that a separation is needed. I think that Derek Carr, like deep down inside, wants it, and I know Saints fans want it for the most part. Slim South says, like Sean Payton and Pat Mahomes, he said he's the best college quarterback he ever evaluated. The draft is about getting leverage. That's all it's about. That's all it's about. These reports that are coming out that are making their rounds is about teams trying to create competition. Like that story that came out last week about Cam Ward. Do I feel like Cam Ward should be the number one pick? Yeah, I do. You know, when we're talking about the quarterback position, we're talking about the Tennessee Titans needing a quarterback. Absolutely. But the story that comes out and saying it's going to take something major in order for them to move off of them, that's saying without saying, look, we willing to let them, we willing to let this pick go, but you're going to have to work for it. So that's kind of what it's on. Or it kind of makes a team like so intrigued to a point like, what did they find? What did they find? Like, oh man, and make them like be willing to move up by any means necessary, because maybe Tennessee has done some research that they weren't privy or they haven't done, and maybe they found something that maybe we didn't see. So it makes them even more intriguing and makes it like even make a team even more desperate to try to move up, and they can fleece them. I mean, it's a competition at the end of the day. Yep, they blew that up. Says, man, even Sean Payton was ripping the bone. Yeah, I mean, it was just bad timing. If this was something that happened maybe a couple of months leading up to the draft, we know how these news cycles are. I mean, there's stories that just come out we just forget about. A friend of ours will bring it up like, oh yeah, that did happen. The news is constantly, being like just put out there. And there's so many different like publications, podcasts, all these different things that are trying to gravitate and trying to get our attention. And, like these stories, like they just come out like we forget about them. And I just think that the timing of that Laramie Tunsil video, I mean, that was, you ain't about to tell me a team didn't put that out there because they wanted this man to fall. unless it was like a scorned girlfriend or something like that. Like, oh, you gonna forget about me when you get drafted? And she just had that on her phone or something like that. I just think that was just, a competitive edge. Somebody wanted that man to drop, and he did. And, he went to Miami. He was really good, got traded from Miami to the Houston Texans, and was a really good left tackle until he was recently traded this offseason. Says, I said the same thing on Big Q show last night. Everybody overreacting to that video, and it's like 2 years old. The tape he got out proves he has talent. You have stories like this every draft. Like, you ever just wonder to yourself, how is it that these stories always seem to come out around draft time? Like, these people know about this stuff. They've been know about this stuff. If you're a great player in college football, trust and believe there's always going to be that reporter that's trying to find something on you. There's always going to be that investigation. It's just something that people just, I don't know. It's just something that always seems to happen. Like, they're going to do their research. Teams are going to do their research. There's a reason why, these stories do come out. But I just find it fascinating that these stories seem to come out around the time where it's the most important time for these players. Like, a couple of years ago, I was, and some of you probably heard me tell this story, the situation with Jalen Carter, with the loss of his college teammate who died in a car crash along with one of the coaches. And that's when we found out Jalen Carter was involved somehow. I was getting off a plane. I was at the baggage claim trying to get my bag. And that's when I started to hear those stories. And I seen a few reporters well-respected, waiting for their bags as well. And, it was like, oh, Jalen Carter was involved in that, that car crash somehow. And he was supposed to speak with the media that day, but of course he got pulled and left the combine. So, these stories are always seen to come out. Did that affect Jalen Carter's draft stock? To me, absolutely. If you look at how he plays right now, he's the best defensive tackle in football right now, based on his production and his performance on the field. So, man, these teams are trying to find ways where they can actually get their hands on these guys. Rather, they're making these phone calls to move up in the draft, or they got their little private investigator out there trying to figure out and trying to bring some stuff up. And maybe, this file just so happened to fall into the hands of ESPN, reporters that's in the newsroom right now. It just finds its way there in a dry file. I don't know, man. Like, these teams are trying to find the best players available. And if these players can drop to them, they'll be happy. So we can't always just overreact. I mean, that's just the plan. The plan is for us to overreact so we can get all up in arms if a team selects them, and that player might end up being a generational talent. I think we can get Mason Taylor later in the round for tight end. We need to revamp our defense. Look at Philly, all young and hungry. Guys bringing pressure on that line. So an edge or linebacker, I'll also take a wide receiver. Yeah, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer with that, Eric. I mean, I think you're making a really good point. Mason Taylor, to me, based on his pro day, probably going to be a high second-round pick. I had him going in the third round on one of my mock drafts that I created. But, I think that you definitely can find a tight end later in the draft. But, look, if you can find a tight end like Tyler Warren, you decide that you want to go with him at 9, I'm not mad at that either. Nobody will be mad if they draft a player and you select him and he ends up being everything you need him to be. It probably won't make sense at the time, but this goes back to the beginning of this podcast when I said, like, what are we doing here? We're talking about, getting needs, but if we are all in agreement that this team needs some work, and it's not like, oh, if you bring this guy in and you solidify this position, then all of a sudden all our problems will be gone. We know that the issue that has been plaguing the Saints has dealt with depth. And also, we're concerned about the future of this franchise. So if Tyler Warren is drafted and you feel like Tyler Warren can be the future George Kittle, the future Gronkowski for the New Orleans Saints, why not? I'm not mad at that. if Tyler Warren gets drafted, you're like, oh man, why would you draft him? You got Juwan Johnson. But if Tyler Warren goes out there, gets nearly 1,000 yards or gets something close to the rookie year of a Brock Bowers, who's saying anything about it? Like, it doesn't make sense until it makes sense. Does that make sense? Right? Yeah. If why did they draft him? Why did they put? We don't need. Then all of a sudden, that player goes out there, plays out his mind. Who cares? We only care because we don't see the big picture. When we see the big picture, then all of a sudden, like, oh, okay, I see you and I understand. Like, sometimes the unknown scares us. It makes us second guess certain things because we haven't seen it, because it's not a finished product. I always use my brother EJ for example. Like, he's an artist, right? He draws these pictures, and I used to stand behind him while he's painting. And I was like, man, you put a little dot here, color there, and then all of a sudden, like, what is he doing? Then the next thing you know, when the paint is finished, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like, at the beginning, it's just a blank canvas. And then all of a sudden, like, you see this work of art and you're like, okay, I see what you're trying to do here. So sometimes those decisions may not look appealing or not be sexy in our eyes in the beginning, but as time go on, we'll realize that maybe it's the best decision. I'm not mad at any decision the Saints make, as long as they bring in players that can make that impact and be those cornerstones that they need to be, because Cam Jordan, DeMario, and Tyrann Mathieu are not going to be around forever. So you got to keep that in mind. TJ, is it possible the Saints take T-Mac Shadur if available at 9, then trade up to that 10 spot and take another impact player? Do you think there'll be a good idea, and what assets would get it done? Well, if you get Terodoro McMillan at 9, that's a good selection. If you get Shadur Sanders at 9, that's a good selection. Based on what I've heard about, Shadur Sanders, some people say that that's not going to happen. I just think that that's absolutely ridiculous if it doesn't. Look, this team needs a franchise quarterback. You can keep on trying to fool the masses, but Derek Carr ain't moving the needle, and Derek Carr is not the future of this team. Rather, they want to convince Saints fans or not. It's just not happening. And I just think as long as the Saints try to prolong the inevitable, I just think that we're just going to get further and further away from what this team used to be. When they had Drew Brees as the quarterback, when they were out here cooking offensively and had a really good coach in Sean Payton, you're just going to get further and further away from that. And, if Shadur Sanders could come in and give you that impact, why not? Like, so what if the guy believes in himself? So what if he carries himself, in a level of confidence? I don't understand why that's just a big idea. I mean, a big problem for some people. Like, maybe it's just the fact that you're not confident. I don't know. Like, but the guy can play football. And I just think that a lot of people fall for these narratives, just like, the whole Terodoro McMillan thing. They fall for these narratives, and they listen to these compelling arguments and these podcasts and these reporters giving these I have a dream speeches as to why these players aren't going to be that. But what does your eyes tell you? What the tape tell you? What I see is a guy who completed 70% of his passes. What I seen is a guy who made plays on makeshift offensive lines at both Jackson State and Colorado. And so what if the man want to be icy and flashy and stuff like that? So the freak what? When he goes out there and play, he gives it all. What game can you just sit up there and say this man just straight up flat out quit? Like, there have been some games where he played bad. I can think about that game in Nebraska, but I can also think about some of them games where at Colorado State when it went into 2 overtimes. I can remember a game at TCU when in his debut at Colorado when he threw for over 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. So I don't know, man. Like, we look at these sound bites and we look at him. Oh man, look at him. He got his hat to the back. He got that jewelry on. He got them diamonds dancing. I don't care. Can he win football games? Like, this isn't a popularity contest. This isn't Miss Congeniality here. Like, we not. I don't care if you're saying the right things, because to be honest with you, the quarterbacks that saying the right things, like, those are the ones I don't trust. Like, who are you really? You're telling me that you're great. You're telling me that you have greatness inside of you. I have no problem with that. I don't. So what's the biggest issue? Oh, he can't play. Where is Where's your proof that he can't play? That's my big question to everybody. Like, that's out here, man, he ain't good. Where's your proof? Because bad quarterbacks don't complete 70% of their passes. Good quarterbacks don't throw for 40 touchdowns and, single-digit interceptions with no offensive line, no running game to speak of. That's all I'm saying. And, he had this, like, this dude did it in 2 stops. But people just want you to be hand in hand and be like, oh, I'm just so glad to be here. Like, man, that's what you're used to. But we're living in a world of NIL right now. These dudes come into the league rich. They don't have to sit up here and just play the game. They don't. And that's what I think the biggest problem is. Like, people are upset now because they can't control a narrative. These big wigs, these big time millionaires, these billionaires, they can't control the narrative anymore because they used to come in and these players had that mind frame like, I need you in order for me to be able to generate success, generational wealth for my family. Now it's like, okay, I play some really good football in high school. I go to a big time program. I'm getting millions of dollars in endorsements already, and I'm out here balling already. And then when I get to the league, it's like, I ain't got to be sitting up here and tap dancing and samboing for you. I ain't got to be sitting up here politicking for you. Why? See, that's what we used to. But I don't care about any of that stuff. What I care about is, can you play the game? And a lot of teams pass up on talented players because they worried about how a player looked and who he perceived. A lot of teams passed up, including our New Orleans Saints, passed up on Lamar Jackson because the narrative is he won't be a good quarterback at the next level. Could he play wide receiver? Lamar Jackson went to the podium and said, I'm a quarterback. I'm a quarterback. And you had so many of these prognosticators who have moonwalked like Michael Jackson at the 25th Motown anniversary when it comes to their statement and trying to stand on business, saying that he wasn't quarterback material in the NFL. But 2 MVPs later, I think everybody would agree that Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in football. So you can continue to convince yourself that Shedeur Sanders won't be a good quarterback if you want to. And when the Saints pass up on him because maybe his diamonds are dancing too much and his hat turned to the back, or maybe he just has his confidence and you see him go to another team and they find a success, please, oh please, spare me the characters that you're going to type about, oh, the Saints missed another one. Because I'm telling you, if this guy is available at 9, the Saints should draft him. No ifs, ands, or maybes. And there's not a person out there that has a compelling enough argument to tell me that this man can't play on the next level. The guy is good. It's just not what we used to seeing when it comes to the quarterback position. Like I said, we want that quarterback to be all shucks, gee golly. But that's not the type of athlete that is in modern day sports. When you got millions upon millions and almost nearly billions of dollars being tossed around. So it's rather you're going to have to adjust your mind frame, or you're going to be very, very upset about many, many more draft picks in the future. I can tell you that right now. But if Shedeur Sanders is there at 9, I'm taking him. That guy can be the future of your franchise. And he can wear his hat to the back all he wants to, as long as he's throwing touchdowns when he leave the field. Saints need to come out of this draft with a starting caliber wide receiver, tight end, safety, offensive tackle, guard, linebacker. Look, you might well just put the whole depth chart on them, Michael. Just put the whole depth chart on there, and we definitely will agree with you. Drummond says, if I was in that room and draft day and Loomis tried to pull some BS, I would barber sap on him. Says Mad Drummer. Yeah, look, man, look, there's no bad decision. There's no bad decision here. In my opinion, there's no bad decision. So many needs on this football team. Sad that one of the best players is a kicker. Well, you want a good kicker. I mean, we talk about kickers little, but when a 48-yard field goal with the game on the line and it goes wide left, man, that. So, yeah, look, having a good kicker ain't a bad thing. You Saints fans don't understand the type of monster you're dealing with when it comes down to garbage. I think that people understand or starting to understand, what Derek Carr is. Look, I think that Derek Carr is a talented quarterback. Do I think he's the best quarterback in the league? Absolutely not. Do I think that you're going to win anything because of Derek Carr solely? Absolutely not. Can Derek Carr put a team on his back constantly? Absolutely not. Just not happening. But I also feel like, and people might get upset with me for saying this, I just think that we are looking at Derek Carr the way that we are is because he is the definitive, without a shadow of a doubt, supposed to be. I say supposed to be. He's supposed to be the successor to Drew Brees. He's supposed to be a succession plan to Drew Brees. And we're comparing him to Drew Brees. And Drew Brees carried himself in a different way. Drew Brees was the epitome of leadership. Drew Brees played the quarterback position at the highest level. Drew Brees is recognized as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And when you talk about the Saints and when you talk about leaders, when you talk about saying the right things, doing the right things, Drew Brees, like, personified. You know what I'm saying? Was personified when it came to that. So when we see that, and then all of a sudden we see someone like Derek Carr, we ain't used to that. And like I said, I don't try to say these type of things to sun anybody. I continue to say this, and I can't stress that enough. But a lot of you only remember Saints football fully. Like, I'm not saying you don't remember Saints football before, Katrina. Some of y'all, was born, in 2000, 2001. But I'm talking about having a really great understanding of football. Drew Brees was that guy. So that's why some of you are like extremely upset, more upset than maybe some of the older fans who probably went through that and understand, because you're comparing Derek Carr to Drew Brees, and it's making you even more upset because he's not that. And also, you look at Drew Brees. I mean, I'll say this when I interviewed Rod Walker on the last episode. When Drew Brees would go to the podium after Drew Brees threw for 350 and 4 touchdowns, and the Saints end up losing because the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed, Drew Brees would always use the words, "We got to get better. I got to get better. It's on me. I got to find ways to get better." And Drew Brees would probably had about a 70% completion percentage and 350 yards, 4 touchdowns. And this is a man sitting up here talking about he got to do better. Meanwhile, you have a quarterback in Derek Carr who is getting upset with a guy in Chris Olave who wasn't supposed to even be in a progression. You were just supposed to take the cornerback out of the picture in order to set up, a pass underneath. But instead of him like not making a right read and taking it on himself, he rather blame Chris Olave, who had absolutely nothing to do with the play. Chris Olave is a guy that was drafted by the Saints. He became our guy in the eyes of Saints fans. He was our guy. And you come in, you're a stranger. So like blaming and trying to deflect and all that kind of stuff, that's quarterback play that Saints fans aren't used to. So a lot of our anger and frustration is he's not Drew Brees. If Drew Brees never existed, and we're talking about in a history of Saints football, like throughout the years, like just think about the quarterbacks that have came before Drew Brees. Let's just say Drew Brees never existed and he never played for the Saints. Will we be having some of these issues and problems that we have with Derek Carr? Or we look at it like, well, at least he ain't Billy Joe Tolliver. At least he ain't Billy Joe Hope, man. I seen Danny Wolf. Ooh, man, at least he ain't that. He's been compared to the greatest New Orleans Saints player of all time. Not just quarterback, player of all time. But the next quarterback that comes in, guess what? He's going to be compared to who? Derek Carr. So I think a lot of our judgment of that quarterback is going to be a little bit different. That's just the way that it goes, man. You never want to be the man who follows the man. You never want to be that person. You always want to be the man that follows the man that follows the man. Because maybe the man that followed the man wasn't good enough to be better than or even close to his predecessor. So you're looking like a breath of fresh air. It's just not a good connection. It's just not a good relationship between Saints fans and Derek Carr. Rather, it's fair of unfair. Some of the criticism is warranted. Some of the examples that I use didn't do him any favors. But he's not the worst quarterback I ever seen. But I just think that Saints fans over the last 15 or 20 years are used to a quarterback that can win in any situation and make everybody around him even better. And if they're not good enough, guess what? I'm going to still drag you to this finish line and we're going to win this football game. So there's my thoughts on Derek Carr. I mean, some people may agree, some people may not, but that's the way I feel. I would hate to see Shedeur end up in Cleveland. Yeah, me too. Well, quarterbacks go to die. Quarterbacks go to die. I do think that Shedeur Sanders would be a good fit with Kellen Moore. I really do. I think that they would be a really good match. And it does sound like to me Kellen Moore wants his quarterback. You're not going to be sitting up there whining and dining with quarterbacks if you don't really want them like that. Quinn Ewers. You're not going to be showing up to all these pro days and sit and have a huge representation of your organization if you ain't looking for no quarterback. You ain't about to convince me. You're not about to convince me. The Saints want a quarterback. Now, I don't know how strained the relationship is or even how much Derek Carr doesn't want to be here. Like, some people would probably indicate that he doesn't want to be here based on some of the movements, some of the energy that seems to be out there. Like, even like the comment and the response by Kellen Moore to me just seemed pretty cookie cutter. And I like him. I think that Kellen Moore is saying all the right things, and I think he believes what he's doing. I also like what he has brought to the team and the tone that he's trying to set. But at the same time, if you was to put Kellen Moore on a polygraph test and say, do you really feel like Derek Carr is your guy? I don't think he'll pass that polygraph test. I think he's saying those things because it's what's in the betterment of the team. He's doing what's best for the team. That is what the team needs of him. Like, I even heard him saying, we know this ain't true. Kai Harley and Mickey Loomis have done a good job at managing the cap. No, they have not. Like, we know that ain't true. Like, if they did a really good job at managing the cap, I'm sorry, Kelly, you probably wouldn't be here. Because although Kellen Moore is a good choice, it seems, he wasn't their first choice. And we all know that the cap had a huge role at the direction they had to go in. But lucky for them, they stumble across a young, promising head coach. So I understand you gotta play the role sometimes. You gotta go along to get along. But like I said, if you put Kellen Moore on a polygraph test, I don't think brother would pass it if we talking about Derek Carr. If you was to ask Kellen Moore on a polygraph test, would you rather roll with Derek Carr in 2025 or draft your own quarterback that you could build into your guy and start a franchise with? If he says Derek Carr is my guy, I don't think he's going to pass that polygraph test. LOL, Carr, just being Carr, career average at best, ain't nothing changed. We 12 years into this thing. Derek Carr is who he is, right? I mean, making these thesis statements about Derek Carr and what it would take for him to be good, I just think that we're past that. We passed that. Like, we can't go and, hop into Marty McFly's DeLorean or Dr. Brown's DeLorean and travel back to 2014 and fix everything that Derek Carr can do. Like, let's put a running back with him, a really sound defense. Can't do that. The book is almost written about Derek Carr. I mean, he is what he is. He's a quarterback that is serviceable. Put him in the right situation, he winning football games. He's not going to win. You're not going to win football games consistently because of what he puts on the field. And he's going to make mistakes that can possibly cost you a game. Or he's not going to elevate his game to a point that can make you pull ahead. Yeah, probably every now and then he'll have a game that, you know, those people that support him will probably say, you see, I told y'all, all he needs is this, all he needs is that. Yeah, he'll give you that game. But then the next week, he's probably going to give you the game that's probably as pedestrian as somebody walking across the street. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Like we look at the great quarterbacks in the NFL, the quarterbacks of the past, and if our quarterback doesn't look like that, we just want to ball him up and throw him in the trash can. But all quarterbacks are not going to be elite. Not all quarterbacks are going to be like heading up Monday morning quarterback. They're going to win you some games. They're going to bring your team to the playoffs. They probably going to make you, excited, have you on the edge of the seat. Like, come on, man, come through for me. Might come through, might not. I mean, Joe Flacco came through for the Baltimore Ravens. Is he a great quarterback? No. Serviceable quarterback. We seen that. Helped the Cleveland Browns a couple of years ago go into the playoffs when Deshaun Watson went down. So, man, everybody's not going to be great. I'm not just going to throw the guy away. There's like, if the Saints were to trade him, he goes to another team, and that team has a good running game, good defense. Yeah, you're probably going to have those Derek Carr supporters out there telling y'all, oh, see, y'all messed up. Y'all messed up. Nobody's saying he's a bad guy, but you need too many. You need too many breaks in order for him to work. And that's just not how the NFL works. Now, you need a quarterback that's going to be able to come through no matter what the situation is. Bad offensive line, bad running game, wide receivers down. I ain't got no defense. Probably if he's great, probably the team don't have no defense because you taking up the majority of the cap. So too many stars need to be aligned here. So, I mean, I just think that both parties, once again, and I'm going to continue to say this, I'm going to sound like a broken record this entire episode. I just think both parties need to split. The whole city will get behind Shedeur. I agree with that. When DA was fired, the writing was on the wall as it pertains to Carr. He was Dennis Allen's guy. Notice when I played one of those clips with Kellen Moore, he said that the organization has brought in. Like, he didn't say we brought in. He said the organization. Like, listen to this guy talk, and you'll see. Man know what he's talking about. He knows where to play the role. He knows how to go along to get along, but he also knows to attach himself, but also detach himself. And he said the organization has brought in, and he mentioned guys, unfortunately, like Spencer, in this case, Spencer Rattler, Jay Haner, and Ben DiNucci, because Ben DiNucci is on the roster right now. So, come on, man. If you gave Kellen Moore a choice, I guarantee he'll take a quarterback. If you gave him a choice. If Shedeur Sanders fell to 9 and you gave Kellen Moore that choice, I think Kellen Moore would take Shedeur Sanders. And it's fair. I'm glad Kellen is aware of who Carr is. It's a start. Also, I want to say this too while I'm thinking about it, because I really wanted to make this point when I was just thinking about and putting these clips together. I think Kellen Moore needs his guy. I think that Kellen Moore deserves to be able to select his guy that can set the tone. That is what Saints fans need. Allow me to elaborate. In 2006, we got to go back with this. The Saints hired Sean Payton as their head coach. And they got Drew Brees as the quarterback. that combination of coach and quarterback, I can remember the exact game, time when I knew that the New Orleans Saints were not the New Orleans Saints that I was used to growing up. It was the game versus the Dallas Cowboys. And you had Sean Payton go up against his mentor, Bill Parcells' Dallas Cowboys. And the Saints, they went out there and they just put on I'm talking about a masterful performance with Reggie Bush and Carney and Colston and all these other guys, right? But it was, to me, it was Drew Brees coming out party. And it made Saints fans realize that the franchise will never be the same after that. And for 15 plus years, it wasn't. And I just think that if we're talking about trying to create a new culture, if we're talking about trying to set a tone, if Kellen Moore feels a certain player fits that role and he ends up being right, then I feel like Saints fans are going to get on board. I know Saints fans are just waiting for something to get excited about. See, contrary to popular belief, some people may believe that all Saints fans or podcasters like myself want to do is just be and moan about the conditions of the team. I beg to differ. I actually enjoyed talking about how good the Saints were around the time when I first started this podcast. But just like anything in life, you got to give people something that they can actually work with. Like, I can't just sit up here and turn, chicken ish into chicken salad. I mean, we can pretend, and I could, but I won't. And I don't think that Saints fans that you talk to want to do the same thing. So I want to see Kellen Moore find his guy, that guy that can set that tone, a guy that can show Saints fans that the last couple of years, we are breaking away from that and getting back to some football that is enjoyable, watchable, and, man, by God, something we can stomach. Because over the years, the Saints have been a boring football team. Now, the Saints didn't win every game during that time with Drew Brees, but you could never say that the Saints were boring. As a matter of fact, like they were too excited. I mean, we knew those games came down to the wire. We holding on to everything, our lucky rabbit's foot, our couch, a pillow. I mean, that lucky little, item that you have in your house. They were never boring. But over the last couple of years, like, they've just been a boring football team. So allow him to set the tone and do things the Kellen Moore way. You trust Sanders because anyone who knows anything about football can see kids going to be special. With an O-line, he had a lack of talent around him. He actually did twice as much as any other quarterback. Philip, I agree. I don't care what anyone says. Shedeur Sanders is a talented quarterback. He is a franchise quarterback. And unless they just throw him in a bad situation where it just, there's a terrible environment, he gonna thrive. He is gonna thrive. I don't understand what people. I don't think a lot of people like really watched him play. Like, they'll probably see, like, because a lot of the talk kind of comes from social media clips. Yeah, there are times where I will agree he holds on to the ball too long. He'll be trying to wait for his receivers to go get open, and he'll be running backwards. Would be losing 20 and 30 yards. Yeah, that's not really smart football, right? You got to live to fight another day. Like, but you can also make an argument that he's trying to, allow his receivers to shine. But yeah, look, it could be. Some people will look at it like, oh, man, he's just trying to take a sack, or he don't want to get rid of football because it hurts his completion percentage. But to me, I've watched every single game this guy's played in his collegiate career. He spent 2 years at my alma mater, Jackson State University. So I watched every game that he's played. Like, if I didn't watch it live, I went back and watched it. And I'm telling you, there's a special football player in that. We get wrapped up in all the extra stuff. But he's a good football player. And I just think if you're judging him based on his appearance or some of the things that he says, I just think you're missing a point. Shadir to Nola, it's fate. I don't know if it's fate or not. I just hope that the Saints, if they're put in that position and an opportunity presents itself, I just hope that they do it. Mind you, at the last press conference of the year, Mickey did say the next coach pretty much has free reign to get who he wants. So that tells me that Kellen wants to get a quarterback. He's going to do it. Well, Alfred, I remember him saying that, and I just hope that that's the case. And once again, if we're talking about a new head coach who has a different philosophy, you have to be able to implement and include him in his process. Because although I will admit, I think that some of the criticism that Jeff Ireland has had over the last couple of years, including from myself, but when I think about like some of the decisions that he made when it came to the draft, he drafted really talented players. Just wasn't a good fit for the team. So, I mean, there were some bad ones. Now we can't just look past Davenport and Peyton Turner. Those were not good picks. But there have been some picks that end up going to other places and living up to that potential. You have a coach in Kellen Moore who has a different philosophy than what you have been used to over the last couple of years. And although, you have brought in some guys that can play, you got to be able to find guys that coincide with what Kellen Moore is trying to build. So I don't think you can create this without Kellen Moore being involved. That would be absolutely insane if they did. We need a dedication fart coordinator would help, says I'll be ripping them. Thank you very much for the $2. Let's see. Say if the Saints do get Shadur, I think it's impossible to keep Carr. Everything he do, it won't be enough. Even if he's balling, they still going to chant for Sanders. So it's best to move on if we do that. Alfred, I agree. That's another great point that you made. First off, I don't feel like it's fair anyway, whether they get Shadur Sanders or not, because he's going to get blamed for everything that goes wrong with the team. The Saints are setting this guy up to, they set him up for failure. Unless Derek Carr goes out here and puts on a Aaron Rodgers type performance when they drafted Jordan Love back in 2020 and Aaron Rodgers won MVP, Saints fans won't be satisfied. They're not going to be satisfied with the Saints knocking off a team that probably 3 or 4 games under 500 and he plays well. That's not going to satisfy him. The only thing that will satisfy Saints fans to me if Derek Carr leads the Saints to the playoffs, all the while like being a MVP candidate, and they somewhere like in the divisional round of NFC Championship game. Like Hatton T-shirt, I don't think still would save the reputation of Derek Carr. It just wouldn't. Saints fans are sour on him, and it would just take too much. So he would have to play like out of his freaking mind. We're talking about a quarterback that has been in the league for 12 years would have to play like he hasn't played ever in the NFL in order for Saints fans to get on board and really start trusting him as the quarterback again. Or I even say again, ever. You know what I'm saying? Trust him as a quarterback, period. Because he's never won a lot of these Saints fans over. I'll be ripping them says a fart coordinator would keep defenses away from our quarterback. He teaches our linemen how to fart and when to fart before the snap. Says I'll be ripping them. Thank you very much for the $5. Look, they need something. Should the Bills draft Derek Herman? I think when it comes to the Buffalo Bills, I think they need a pass rush. So if somebody like, and this is a possibility, Dalton, that somebody like James Pierce Jr. can fall to him. Like this is a guy who has that reputation. A lot of people know how talented he is, how athletic he is, but he has had some issues. And if somebody like that can fall to him, I think that would probably be great. I think they just need help with pass rush. I think the biggest issue last year in the playoffs, they didn't have that guy that can be able to set that tone and constantly be able to give that pass rush. It was more like sack by committee. So I think that a really good pass rush would be able to help them. Also, you might want to look at wide receiver. Even though I like Keon Coleman, I like Shakir. I think that I think that Dalton Kincaid is a really good tight end. But at the end of the day, I just think that maybe you need that other guy, that can be that true number one. Maybe Keon Coleman this offseason can take that extra step. He started to really come on towards the end of the season. But I think they need a wide receiver, and also think they need a pass rush. I think if they definitely need a pass rush. Like you got the right quarterback. You won league MVP. You got the right running back in James Cook. Maybe somebody that you can maybe have as a 1-2 punch. I think that Ray Davis is good. I think that some of the guys that they had in their backfield were good, but I think that maybe you need somebody that can be able to complement James Cook, and this is a deep draft for that. But yeah, they need somebody that's going to be able to put the quarterback on the ground. And a cornerback wouldn't hurt them either, I mean, they got a decent cornerback room, but not anybody that's going to be moving a needle. Carr can't even stay healthy long enough to save his reputation. Even if he's balling, he'll go down with an injury. I hope that that's not the case, man. I'm not trying to see that man get hurt. I'm not trying to see any quarterback get hurt. I don't care who they play for. Like, I want to see this man finish his career on his terms, his season on his terms. If you're going to be the starting quarterback of the Saints, just want you to play at a high level. Don't care who you are. If we get Sanders at 9, we still can build the team and be competitive this year. I agree. I mean, you got a plethora of draft picks. You're picking pretty high in the second round. You got 2 third-round picks. You can really, if you do your homework, you can really put this team together and have some really quality starters and a really talented roster for the future. So anybody like, oh, man, if they take this first-round pick and they go, why would you want somebody sitting on the bench? Well, if you know that player that's sitting on the bench, I give an example. The Kansas City Chiefs had Alex Smith as their quarterback. Alex Smith led the Kansas City Chiefs to the playoffs, but they decided that they was going to get Patrick Mahomes with the 10th pick in the draft. Now, suspend what you know about Patrick Mahomes right now. Multiple-time MVP, Super Bowl MVP, face of the NFL. Suspend all that. All he was a very talented quarterback from Texas Tech. Played at Texas Tech. I mean, that pretty much tells you everything that you need to know right now. And he's sitting on a bench. Like you picked him with the 10th pick in the draft. Played in the very last game of the season when the Kansas City Chiefs were already in playoff contention. And the next year, he ended up taking over, becoming the face of the franchise, league MVP. So all I'm saying is, like, who knows? Like, oh, man, we was in the playoffs, man. We need to find that one person that was prohibiting us from really reaching that full success. Should they have gone after somebody else instead of Patrick Mahomes? So if Patrick Mahomes would have ended up going to the Saints, and what the Kansas City Chiefs have been, the Saints are, how do you think those Kansas City Chiefs fans probably would feel? Or, a team that picked after the Saints, because the Kansas City Chiefs wasn't supposed to pick after the Saints. I can't remember who the team was that picked after the Saints. I would have to look, but all I'm saying is, who cares? Go back to my statement a few episodes ago. Who cares if you end up drafting a player and he end up being everything that you need him to be? You won't be mad after that if that player ends up being a generational talent, a face of the franchise. No matter how you got to that point, rather he was an instant starter day one, or he sat an entire year and the next year he was ready to rock and roll. If he ends up being the face of that franchise, who cares? So all this stuff about, oh, if you draft a player, why would you want a player sitting on the bench? we are all in agreement that it takes more than what a ninth pick in the draft in order to fix the Saints' issues. So why are we pretending like that's not the case just because if the Saints draft somebody that ends up going to be a quarterback in waiting or a running back in waiting? That just doesn't make much sense to me. We can't say on one hand, oh, this team ain't closing. And on the other hand, they finding a player that can help them be close for years to come, and we have a problem with it. Doesn't make any sense. But thank you so much for checking out the State of the Saints podcast. Really do appreciate it. Much love to each and every one of you. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, I ask that you hit the like button. If you didn't, I ask that you hit the like button. And also, if you're new, please subscribe to the channel. You can check out previous episodes right here on YouTube. Also, check out the interviews that I've done over the last couple of weeks. There's a playlist entitled State of the Saints Interviews. You can check out those. Also, Saints Talk with Timothy J. Jones on the Bleacher Report every Wednesday at 7 p.m. We'll continue our talk about the owners meeting as well as some of the new rules that were implemented. The one that I didn't get a chance to talk about because, I was reading some of your comments, and I appreciate you all chiming in, was the new touchback rule where the ball actually comes to the 35. The NFL is trying to cause teams to maybe, kick the ball to returners in order for them to return the football versus kicking it out of the back of the end zone. So starting at the 35, they say that that's the case, but to me, I just think that they want to see people score more. I do. I just think that starting at the 35, they know there's a really good chance that drive is probably going in a field goal or a touchdown. But that's just me. I like to know what you all think about that. But you can check me out on X at TJAY Jones 8. You can also check me out on Instagram, TJ Jones _ TJ the host on TikTok. And I really do appreciate each and every one of you's time. Till next time, all I got to say is, who that?
Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast. Please subscribe to our channel.
All I got to say is, who that?